welcome back to the Tea and a Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And today's episode, we're going to be talking about me and the popular UK sitcoms I never got into. Or just never really cared for, or,
Yeah.
Just, never really watched.
Yeah.
Really. And I mean, I've narrowed it down to about 10. I looked at things.
10?
I refresh my memory. Yeah.
How are there that many? I feel like you've shown me like every British show.
Well, some of these
ever
you
made.
probably heard of, and I mean I've probably talked about them, but we'd never really watched an episode of them because I've never really been into them. So.
Oh God, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that there's that many. I feel like I've seen every UK show ever made.
You've seen most of the popular ones. You've seen a good chunk of the popular ones. But yeah, there's a lot.
All right, let's hear
There was a lot from the well, from the well.
From the well?
The wells of sitcom, British sitcom.
Yeah.
I mean,
What
a lot
do you
of
mean,
them
like older ones?
There's older ones. I've got a couple of new, modern-ish ones.
So these are all shows that you have seen.
I've seen them,
and
yes.
you've tried to watch them.
Well, I wouldn't say tried to watch them. I've watched enough of them to go, yeah, this isn't funny, or,
Yeah.
Just not my bag,
But there's shows that have been on for a while that
they're
people
popular,
like.
yeah. They're very popular with other people. Everybody, well, not everybody, obviously, because I'm not alone in my, disregard for these, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a couple that come up and go, oh, what? I love that show.
Now, where'd you get these? Did you,
I looked at, the top 50.
Top 50 shows of all time.
Top 50 British sitcoms of all time.
Yeah.
And a good chunk of them were shows that I liked, especially the top 5. Or the top 10
I looked at the top 50, and I liked all of those, so I had to go to the next 50.
And I got this kind of, list from, britishcomedy.co.uk.
Yeah.
Which, because in 2004 there was a poll, as, and I think they did it for, the Greatest Britain, too, but then they decided, we'll do the best British sitcom of all time.
Yeah.
And Only Fools and Horses won it.
Okay, yeah.
And then it was Blackadder, then I think it was The Vicar of Dibley, and then maybe Fawlty Towers or something like that. Then it was Dad's Army, and then it was these are all on the list, but I like them,
Yeah.
But these ones I've watched, and I've seen, obviously repeats. Some of these I didn't see when they first came out because I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
And it's, I've just been kind of just what? But when I've been looking at these lists, I'm thinking, I need to give a couple of these a chance, and I'll talk about them when we go through them.
But you didn't put any on the list that you haven't really seen that just look like something you're not interested in from the previews, right? Like you've actively sat and watched at least part of an episode.
At least part of an episode, yes.
All right, cool. Let's go.
Okay, the first one, and this is one that I kind of tried to get into because it was always on ITV3. That's a channel in Britain that kind of shows old stuff now, repeats.
Like reruns.
Reruns, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's called On the Buses. And it ran from 1969 to 1973. And it was huge in the UK.
Yeah.
It was very huge.
Yeah.
And it spawned 3 feature films.
This is one that I have even seen part
Yeah,
of
I probably put it on one day.
We watched one with your dad one time. It was on TV.
It was probably on ITV3. I probably put it on because he never really watches he never really watched reruns.
Yeah, and we were all just kind of like, what,
And no, it's I remember him saying, I never got into it, either. It was, I watched it once. It was on one morning or something. I put it on in my room and I tried to sit and watch it, and I was like, this was around the time when the Carry On films were starting to get.
When did it come out?
1969.
69. Okay,
and then it ran till 1973. I think 2-3 series. Mm-hmm. And they had like 3 hugely popular feature films. The first one, which was released in 1971, it topped the box office and kept the Diamonds Are Forever, the new James Bond, out of the, because usually that goes to number 1.
Jeez, yeah.
And it was like, that, I don't know what's worse. It's like, is that how bad Diamonds Are Forever was, or how good On the Buses was?
Yeah.
It was hugely popular. And, when I look at it and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like the Brexit voting public.
Explain what it's about for people listening who have never heard of it.
If you've never heard of it, it's centered on the working class life of Stan Butler, who was played by Reg Varney, and Jack Harper, who was played by Bob Grant. And they're the crew of the number 11 bus at the Luxton and District Motor Traction Company, on the buses. And it actually mostly takes place at Stan's home with Olive Rudge and her husband Arthur.
Oh, so it doesn't even take place on the buses?
No, it does. But the scenes at home with Stan.
Okay.
And I think Bob Grant's character Jack lives next door to him.
Okay, yeah.
And they're all. I remember watching it, and
they drive. They drive like city buses.
He drives the bus.
Yeah.
And Stan is like the two. Stan drives the bus, and Jack is the ticket taker. As they used to be, years ago, they used to have, ticket takers on there. Because, double-decker buses, you could just walk on them, and at the back.
Yeah.
And so they drove these, and he drove the bus, Stan did. And, they'd be at the bus depot, too, and they had a bus inspector guy there, Blake, played by Stephen Lewis.
Yeah. Who
was known for many things. I think he appeared later on in Last of the Summer Wine, which, I was considering putting on the list, but I was like, I kind of like that show, actually. So,
yeah.
Even
though I think that's big over here. I seem to think
Last of the Summer Wine?
Yeah, I seem to think they play that on PBS. I've never seen it, but I seem to think I've seen it on the TV schedule.
It ended in 2010, and it's the world's longest running sitcom.
It's the one about all the old men, right?
The 3 old men.
Yeah.
There's a trio of them, and usually one of them gets changed out every so often. I mean, it's ended now anyway. I mean, I think they're all dead now.
I think it's come on.
They're all dead now, but, it's just like, it started in the 70s and ended in 2010. It was so long running,
Yeah. So why could you not get into On the Buses?
Well, it just was very cheap jokes.
Oh, yeah.
It was very kind of this is a bad attempt to cash in on the Carry On and the kind of the humor of the time.
Yeah.
Which was I don't know, it was just kind of usually they'd be kind of they were best friends, Stan and Jack, and they were always trying to date women, and they always looked like they were in their 50s, but they were I guess they were in their 30s at the time,
Yeah.
And then Olive and Stan's mother lived at home. He lived at home with his mother, and his sister was Olive, and she was married to Arthur.
Okay.
And they were always kind of saying something about Arthur, making fun of Arthur because he had some sort of operation.
Okay.
And Arthur was bald, or he was balding or something, and they were always making bald jokes, and I was just like, God, it's like cheap jokes, It's just bald,
and it was, and it was the same thing.
It was the same kind of thing all the time. It was kind of and I mean, at the time, I'm sure it was hilarious.
Yeah.
If you weren't, it was kind of geared toward the older crowd,
Yeah.
The people who'd been in the war, I guess, at that time, it was just the old crowd. And, I'll have you, Butler, Inspector Blake, because they were always, playing jokes on him. And it was huge. It was and they still repeat it today, but it's kind of it's dated. It's very dated.
Yeah.
I mean, even for British comedy standards, which, when you consider Little Britain and all that kind of stuff, it was that was dated humor, and that was only 15 years ago.
Yeah. Wasn't there haven't I heard you say there was a bit of racism and racist jokes and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was. They used to call this, because there was, there was this black...
And not in an all in the family kind of way where they're making fun of racist
they used
people.
To call this black... I think he was a bus ticket taker too. I don't know what his character's name was, but they used to call him Chalky.
Oh, jeez.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, Chalky, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, you know?
Yeah.
You know, it was a little bit, I mean, a lot of like, you can look through any old sitcom and find that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Because that was the tone of the time. I mean, it wasn't like overtly, you know, like there wasn't like rants and whatever about them, you know, but, you know, it was just kind of like, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, detracting that, the show just wasn't funny anyway, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm struggling to see how it managed to, you know...
yeah, have an audience.
Have an audience, you know? And I mean, you know, I look through the people who love it, who love old British comedy, and they go, oh yeah, on the buses, and it's kind of like the people who are my age or a little bit older who like it.
Yeah.
Because it's got that working class humour.
Or, I mean, sometimes it can be like, maybe they like it because they associate it with being at their grandparents' house.
That's
and their grandparents
probably what it is.
On,
yeah,
know?
That's probably might be another reason for it too.
It's just that association.
But I never,
than
you know,
that it's a great show.
I never grew up with it.
Yeah,
you know. I mean, come to think of it, you know, it wasn't like when I'd go to my grand's house. The stuff she had on TV was like songs of praise and stuff, you know, Antiques Roadshow and all that kind of stuff. She never watched comedy or sitcoms and stuff. We'd have to do it. You know, we'd have to put it on TV and whatever, and she'd have to sit there and not complain, because that would be one of the jokes, the running kind of gags in our family. It would be we'd be trying to watch like something round her house, and she'd be chattering away, gossiping about the neighbours or whatever like that. And then when a commercial came on, shut up, and we'd say, yeah, you know, it's like, could you not do this during the commercial break, you know? But it's like,
so she wanted to watch the commercials.
She wanted to watch them, probably, yeah. But yeah, like...
Okay, what's next?
The next one is Are You Being Served? You must have heard of this one. It comes on PBS.
Yeah.
Or it came on PBS.
Yeah,
I
definitely have heard of it.
72 to 85. Yeah, another one that was huge in Britain that I've seen episodes of, and I'm just kind of like,
When did it come on?
1972.
72.
The 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
Until the 80s, yeah. And I think they...
Geez, so these are like long-running shows.
I mean, well, On the Buses wasn't really that long-running, but yeah, it had an audience that kept it in the public's minds, I guess.
To me, more than a couple years is decently running for a show that,
well, yes.
Some people are like, oh, it's not great, you know.
Because in Britain, some of the most popular shows ran for 2 series or 3 series, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like they were hugely popular still years later, you know.
And I mean, over here, it's like a show, even if it has a decent sized audience, can get canceled after one season, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, 3-4 years is quite a while for a show that, you know,
and I think that was kind of like, it was all the way, you know, it was like consecutive. It wasn't like a gap of 5 years and then it came back for like series 3 or whatever, because some of these do, you know.
Oh, yeah, right.
This one, Are You Being Served? It was set in London. The show follows the misadventures and mishaps of the staff of the retail ladies and gentlemen's clothing departments in the flagship department store of a fictional chain called Grace Brothers. And the popular characters in that were Mr. Humphreys, played by John Inman, who was a sales assistant in Gents, and he was camp acting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it wasn't explicitly stated he was gay on the show, but he was just a mother's boy. He was a mummy's boy. He lived with his mother.
Yeah.
But he was like, I'm free, and he'd be like, make double entendres to his gay lifestyle.
Right.
And so everybody was like, oh, he's gay, but they would be like, well, he never actually said that on the show. You know, obviously we wouldn't say it because back then it would be a...
Yeah, when did it become legal in Britain?
67.
67,
But
okay.
still... It took the public a long time to catch up. And
even longer,
yeah. It's, you know, so he was just, like, implied to be gay, you know.
Yeah.
And then there was Mrs. Slocum, played by Molly Sugden. And she was a senior sales assistant and head of the ladies' department. She was known for her changing hair colour. She used to have it purple and whatever, like the blue rinse of old ladies used to get.
Oh, right, yeah.
Back in those days, and telling double entendre stories about her cat Tiddles.
Okay.
And it would just be kind of like, yeah, and a lot of people, a lot of the critics were just like, yeah, this is another show that relied too much on bawdy humour and, stereotypes. And
I mean, I think that was...
And that was common.
Pretty popular and common in the 70s.
Popular. Yeah, it's kind of like what they like to call sophomoric humour, which is like toilet humour and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes that you got to catch me in the mood for that,
Yeah. I'm not a fan, really.
But there's people who that's funny to them all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like, sometimes, it's just like, oh, this is stupid.
Yeah. I mean, you know how I feel about actual, like...
throw up and...
poop jokes.
And fart jokes or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like that all the time. And I mean, I've seen enough episodes of it, and I've just been like, oh, it's boring. It's just boring to me, it's just not funny.
It's just, there's nothing clever there, really.
Yeah, no.
Like, it's easy to write that kind of...
Yeah, no, that's easy to write, and it's kind of like for the masses.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another one. I mean, there's probably fans of it out there who are going, oh, it's so good, oh, it's so funny, oh, because I remember watching it on, with my grandmother or, my parents growing up or whatever, so it's just like, that's it, The next one, Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, which was hugely popular. Now, I've watched a couple of, like, clips when I was, like, doing research before for, like, a blog post years ago. I watched a couple of clips of it, because I'd only seen, like, one episode, and I just didn't find it funny, But, when I watched a couple of clips a couple of years ago, I thought, oh, well, maybe I should give this a chance, and I just never have gotten around to it.
I mean, some shows, to be fair, like... you have to watch a few episodes to get into them. Yes,
it takes a slow burn.
To get into the characters, to, whatever.
The one I always say with you is Downton Abbey. You were just kind of like, oh, after the first episode, you were like, this is kind of slow, and this is kind of boring. Yeah. And we're just like, oh, we'll give it a couple more episodes. Then you were so into it then.
By, like, the second episode, I was like, okay, I love this.
Yeah. Okay, I love this.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, the Some Mothers Do Have 'Em.
This is from the 70s again.
Yeah, 1973 to 78, yeah. Series follows the accident-prone Frank Spencer and his tolerant wife Betty through Frank's various attempts to maintain a job, which frequently end in disaster. Sitcom was noted for its stunt work performed by Michael Crawford himself, who played Frank Spencer, and it featured several well-known and much lampooned catchphrases that have become part of British popular culture. Yeah, I mean, I always used to hear that growing up. Ooh, Betty! And I've got a little trouble. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my dog, or, someone making that reference. Yeah. And I'd just be like, yeah, I don't really get it, but it's from...
Well, Frank Spencer, I've definitely heard that. Like, yeah. He's is he a character in something else too, or
no,
is it from
he's just been mentioned several times throughout the ages.
Yeah.
In reference to the show. In reference to the show, and reference to somebody being a buffoon or an idiot.
Okay. Because sort of like people go, oh, he's a bit of a Victor Meldrew.
And this is another thing. He was referenced in One Foot in the Grave.
Oh yeah.
When the plant in the toilet scene, when he was on the thing, he goes, oh, yes, I didn't catch his name, but it may have been Frank Spencer.
Oh, okay.
The delivery guy. Oh, can someone be utterly goofy is beyond me, Yeah. And it's funny because Richard Wilson guested in an episode, and that's the episode I've seen, actually.
Oh, really?
Where he plays an insurance agent.
Yeah.
Who comes round, and then there's like a scene where they have to sit in a seat together, and he's kind of like really down in it, and you could tell that was kind of like a bit of a goof, because he turns away because it's shot in front of a live audience. Richard Wilson turns his face away, and he looks like he wants to laugh because it's just absurd, but they kept going, and the character, I've seen it a couple of times. Oh, that's where you might know him from. He came back in 2016 to do the comic Sport Relief. Michael Crawford resurrected the character.
Frank Spencer.
Yeah, and he was going on a bike, and he was causing mayhem. And Paul McCartney was in one of the things going, hey, you know.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look for the clip after and show it to you. But yeah, I remember.
Maybe we can put it in the blog for people to see.
Yeah, we'll stick it in the blog, and you can see what I'm talking about with all these. Some mothers do have them. Yeah, that was kind of like the catch. It was a cat. The title was a reference. Oh, some mothers do have them to people who are inept and foolish. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because they're just like they can't do anything right.
Some mothers do have them like
some mothers do kid. A foolish kid. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really big on that kind of humor either. The main the main example that's sticking in my head is Mr. Bean.
Yeah, a lot of the influence of Frank Spencer was taken from Mr. Bean, but Frank Spencer, you know, they tried to make his character kind of like...
Oh, wait, but this was before Mr. Bean,
yeah, it was well before Mr. Bean.
Oh, so a lot
Mr. Bean. For Mr. Bean, okay, yeah, that's what I mean, yeah, sorry.
But I think that the reason why that works is because he doesn't really speak... So there's something like a bit innocent and childlike about him.
That was the same way about Frank Spencer. That's why they kind of wrote him. His reactions to things and his, you know, in the first couple of series were kind of like childlike and innocent. You know, the way he'd kind of like talk about things. He'd be like, ooh, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, you know, should I do this? You know.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to try to watch.
We'll watch a couple of episodes. You know, because I kind of want
maybe we could plan to do that with our patrons. That might be fun, just to see like.
Yeah, that's an idea.
What they think. Yeah,
so I think this is on BritBox. So.
If you guys want to check out our Patreon page, we are patreon.com/TeaandABuddy.
Tea and a Buddy, yeah. The next one I've got on the list is The Likely Lads. And I'm going to include the sequel show, Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, in this too.
I think this is the first one I have never heard of.
Oh, yeah, no. I don't think I've ever seen an episode of The Likely Lads. Mm-hmm. Because it came on from 1964 to 66. And of course, the BBC were wiping stuff then, so it doesn't really... I mean, there's some episodes exist.
They don't really have it
but they don't really have it to rerun anymore, yeah. But they do have Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads.
That's hilarious. Whatever happened to... Here's what happened to them. We wiped them.
Yeah.
They don't exist anymore.
It was, you know, James Bolam and Rodney Bewes played Bob and... Terry and Bob. And they were two deeply contrasting young working-class men who learned to cope with working and social life in the northeast of England. And Bob is ambitious and aspires to a better life, and he's a wannabe social climber and willing to work to attain his aspirations, but somewhat lacking in self-confidence. And Terry is upfront and assertive, deeply cynical, and living in the here and now, and they're out for a good time. He wants nothing more than a beer, lasses, and football. Mm. And despite their differences, the pair are near inseparable through a series of harebrained schemes and dates and adventures. Yeah. And they were only supposed to be 19.
Okay.
When it was, and they kind of looked it, I guess, too, you know.
Yeah.
But maybe they were a little bit older at the time. And that only lasted for a couple of series on the BBC, 64 to 66. And then in 1973, they brought it back and called it Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads. And I guess that was someone who thought, you know, whatever happened to the Likely Lads? Oh, that's a good idea. Let's see what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's been over 5 years since a little mishap that left Terry in the army and Bob discharged with flat feet in the Likely Lads, because I guess that happened at the last of the last episode of the original series.
Yeah. It was one of those series that they just stopped making.
They just kind of stopped making, yeah. Because, I mean...
Yeah.
The 70s really were the golden age of the sitcom, of the British sitcom anyway. I mean, maybe you'd say that over here, but again, they were being most of the ratings hits over here were being adapted from British shows.
Yeah.
Like Sanford and Son and All in the Family and...
Three's Company.
Three's Company, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like... And, funnily enough, they tried to do it with Are You Being Served and call it Beans of Boston, and it never really took off.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I never really got into it. James Boland, I've seen him in countless other things. Rodney Bewes, not so much.
I mean, it sounds kind of okay.
Yeah.
Is it, again, the kind of body...
No. It's kind of, it's kind of like, it was just kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
I just never got in.
Really was happening.
Yeah, I don't remember. I haven't really tried to watch it since. So maybe this is one I could try and give another chance to.
Yeah.
On the buses, I'm not.
Or maybe it wasn't as good as the original. I mean,
maybe, and I think that
we'll never know. Apparently.
Well, no, there are episodes that survive.
Oh yeah.
But some are missing. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about, because you get like Dad's Army. Oh, some episodes of Series 2 are missing, but Series 1 is complete.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that? Yeah. Who was like...
They just grabbed a tape.
They just grabbed a tape and wiped it.
We need a tape to record on. Here's one.
Yeah, and I mean, back then, I can't really blame them for doing that, because at the end of the day, they didn't think things were going to last. They showed it on TV, and were like, okay... You that's it. It's gone now. We're on to the newest thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like longevity and archival is like, that only started becoming a thing in the 80s when people were like, do you remember that great show? Oh, you should find out all those clips of the Beatles that we've deleted.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah. But yeah, now, in Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, it's been over 5 years, and Terry's now back in civilian life, and he returns to Newcastle to find that everything has changed. Not least his friend Bob, who is now engaged to be married and upwardly mobile in more ways than one. And there's no love lost between Terry and Bob's fiancée, Thelma, so reinvigorating their friendship will prove difficult at the best of times. And, it's just there kind of like, what was going on. It only ran for like a couple of series, 73 to 74.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think they haven't brought it back since or remade it. The next one is It Ain't Half Hot, Mum.
I don't think I've heard of this one either.
Yeah, this one... I watched a couple of episodes and it was kind of like... what do you call it? The Hogan's Heroes? It's kind of like that kind of thing over here, I think,
Okay.
But Allo Allo was more like that, I think.
Yeah.
Basically, that ran from 74 to 81. That was another popular show. I remember Windsor Davis was in it as the Battery Sergeant Major Williams. And he had a big, deep Welsh booming voice.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd be like big moustache, and he'd be like, all right, come on now, boyos,
Yeah.
It's set as World War II is coming to a close. The Royal Artillery Concert Party in India are doing their utmost to keep themselves away from the front line. Battery Sergeant Major Williams sees his men as an embarrassment and is determined to knock them into shape. However, he has little support from his senior officers who enjoy the theatrical aspect of their job. Nevertheless, they are thrust into situations which call for more than just the ability to apply grease paint and lipstick. They were kind of like, it was like Ensa, like the entertainment section of the army.
Okay,
focusing on what they were doing,
Oh, right. I mean, that sounds like an interesting premise.
I think there was a lot of bawdy humour and stuff in it, though, and it was very typical 70s kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like...
The only one I remember from that show is Windsor Davis, I think he was like the breakout kind of like star of it, because of his Sergeant Major,
Yeah.
The next one, Red Dwarf. Now... That was like the 1988.
Yeah.
And it came back recently. They revived it over on the channel Dave.
Now, I have seen Red Dwarf because that used to, I don't know if it still does, but it used to come on PBS all the time.
Yeah.
And it seems like any time I was staying over at my aunt and uncle's house, they were watching that, like on a Saturday night. And I don't know how many episodes I saw of it because I could not... I don't know, it was like I couldn't understand what was happening.
It was kind of like very alternative. I mean, I recently watched on BritBox the first episode, and I thought, oh, it's kind of funny. Yeah. Some of it's kind of funny. I can see how people can get into this, because I thought, oh, well, it's science fiction and comedy merged, and, you know. Basically,
I mean, first of all, I used to have a really bad problem with shows with, like, low production values. Like, I just could not get into them.
Yes, the BBC had, I mean, in those days,
and the production value on Red Dwarf, I was just like, what is this? Like, this looks like it was made in somebody's basement. Like, you know, it's just like the cheapest looking show.
A lot of them would, you know, they had zero budget to work with, you know.
Yeah.
It was all about the writing. The writing is what makes it, you know, it's like, because it's like, you can easily nowadays make a glitzy and polished looking show with great sets and great everything. But if the writing is not there, then who's going to watch it, you know?
Yeah.
Who's going to remember it? With Red Dwarf, that was the same thing. I mean, I just couldn't really get into it, you know?
Yeah. Oh, my aunt and her husband absolutely loved that show and would, like, laugh their butts off watching it. And I was just like, I don't know what I was doing, but I would have to do other things to, like, entertain myself because I could not get into it.
Yeah, I mean, the synopsis of it is following a catastrophic leak of radiation aboard mining spaceship Red Dwarf, technician Dave Lister, played by Craig Charles, finds himself as the last living human. Having been held in a form of suspended animation known as stasis at the time of the leak, he was shielded from its fatal effects while all of his colleagues were turned into piles of dust.
Okay.
Yeah, because I watched that on the pilot episode. Now, some 3 million years later, with background radiation at a safe level, the ship's computer Holly has revived him in readiness for the long journey home. However, Dave's not quite alone. His arch-nemesis and workmate Rimmer, Chris Barry, played by Chris Barry, survives as a hologram, as does a descendant of Lister's own pet cat called Cat.
Yeah.
Played by Danny John Jules from Death in Paradise.
It's kind of funny that you never got into this because you're a big science fiction fan.
No, I thought it, and I just couldn't find it funny. And my dad had a friend, well, you know, he's still alive, Phil, who said, oh yeah, you should watch Red Dwarf, it's really good, you know, and all this kind of stuff, you know, and I just like, I'm just can't get into it. I don't know why, you know. But, you know, I watched the first episode, it's again another one I want to give another try to, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah. The next one is Coupling.
Oh, yeah.
Again, you know,
Coupling just has such a funny story, like.
I mean, 2000 to 2004, and it was the dating, adventures, and mishaps of 6 friends in their early 30s. 3 men and 3 women.
Yeah.
Each talking among themselves about the same events, but entirely different terms. It's kind of like...
It was a rip-off of Friends.
It was a huge rip-off of Friends. And they remade it over here. And I remember someone doing a documentary going, yeah, they didn't realise they were remaking a show that someone had ripped off from Friends.
Yeah. They were remaking
NBC,
a show that
I think, wanted to do it.
NBC remade a show that was already a remake of Friends.
Yes. Basically, and then that's what the critics called it. And Stephen Moffat wrote it. It was really popular.
I mean, we did watch a couple episodes of that.
It was okay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like anything like, you know, just watch Friends.
It just felt like a rip-off of Friends.
Yes. Yeah. Phoenix Nights is the next one. And that was only 2 series, I think. But that was hugely popular.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
Peter Kay. It was basically a vehicle for Peter Kay, really. Bad-tempered, wheelchair-bound Brian Potter, played by Peter Kay, runs a working man's club in Bolton called the Phoenix. The struggling club is staffed by an odd bunch, including licensee Jerry Sinclair. The club has had a troubled history, having been closed many times. Brian is now trying to bring it back to its former glory, but is often hampered by things not really going to plan. I watched an episode of it, and I couldn't get into it. I don't know why. And I haven't put it on the list, but the Royal Family's another one too.
Okay.
Royle, the Royal Family.
Oh yeah.
And you know they're a working class family, I think from Liverpool. And, Jim Royal is like the patriarch of the family, and he sits on, his catchphrase is, "My ass."
That's a catchphrase, is it?
He'd have like rants about things, and then and I don't know why I couldn't get into that, because everybody found it hilarious, because it was like, oh yeah, that's how my family are when we get together.
Yeah.
We're watching the TV and Nana's there eating all the Maltesers or whatever it is, and someone's getting annoyed about it. And but yeah, no, it was just kind of like, I just couldn't get into it,
Yeah.
And the next one, 2.4 Children. Oh my god, this show it ran from 91 to 99, which was...
Is that the one with Robert Lindsay?
No, that's My Family, and I was considering putting that on the list too, because I never really could get into that.
Yeah.
That was too much of a...
Maybe we need to make a part 2.
Maybe, yeah.
Even more shows Dominic couldn't get into.
Yeah, because, we're running out of time here a little bit, but, this is the last but one. The synopsis for 2.4 Children is: welcome to deepest, darkest Chiswick, and the very average terraced home of the Porter family. Ben, played by Gary Olson, a plumber, lives with his wife Belinda Lang, and their 2 children, Jenny and David. While struggling to keep on top of the rest of the family's woes, Bill runs a small catering business with her man-hungry best friend and neighbour Rona. On the surface, they're a very average family unit, complete with 2.4 children. The 0.4 in the guise of fun-loving Ben. But behind the unexceptional facade, the Porters and their friends find themselves caught in a never-ending string of bizarre situations and peculiar dilemmas. It seems that bad luck, strange occurrences, and poor judgment all conspire to turn the Porters' world topsy-turvy. It was kind of like, let's put a family situation into One Foot in the Grave, and it didn't really work. I didn't really find it funny. It was hugely popular.
Yeah, it seems like I've heard of it.
Yeah, it was hugely popular in the 90s, and the theme song of it is running through my head now. Because that's, it was always on, it seemed like, but I never really found it as funny as One Foot in the Grave,
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe down the line I'll give it another chance if I see it again, if I see an episode or whatever, but yeah. But I've saved the best till last.
The best or the worst?
The worst till last, I should say, yeah. Mrs. Brown's Boys.
Yeah. This I've definitely heard of.
It's just terrible. It's just really terrible. It's like, it started in 2011, and it's still going.
Again, it's the kind of cheap joke humor, isn't it? It's cheap
joke humor that appeals to some aspect that keep it going.
So in summary, Dominic doesn't like shows with cheap jokes.
Cheap jokes, sometimes cheap jokes work, but they don't always work,
Yeah.
I like expensive jokes. I like ones that really pay a good dividend,
I think some people just like shows where they don't have to really think a lot.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, it's obvious humor,
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Mrs. Brown's Boys, and hopefully some of you aren't, the series stars Irish comedian Brendan O'Carroll as Agnes Brown, who's, so it's basically him in a woman's, like, in woman costume, like this old Irish mammy type.
Yeah.
With several close friends and family members making up the rest of the cast.
He's playing her.
He's playing her.
He's playing a female.
Yeah, he's playing her.
So it's a little Tyler Perry, like...
A little bit, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And the show adopts an informal production style, often breaking the fourth wall, where production mistakes and tomfoolery, mostly instigated by O'Carroll, are edited into each episode.
That's kind of funny. That's kind of
fun,
Despite
being lambasted by critics and unfavourable comparisons to Father Ted. Yeah, there's a lot of people who go like, this show is trying to be Father Ted, but it's falling very flat.
Yeah. But yet it's been on for a while, hasn't
it? The show it became a rating success both in Ireland and the UK. because it's recorded in the UK. It's
Okay.
recorded in, like, in front of a live studio audience. It's like a play kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like the Irish mammy thing. And it's like, it's just very, like, it plays on all the stereotypes and people belly laughing, going, ah, ha, ha, ha. You know, and it's just like, I just don't find it funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of like a little bit too highbrow for it.
Oh, and listen to you.
I receive high ratings. But then again, people might think Father Ted is lowbrow, but it's like, no, there was method in that madness.
Yeah.
You know, whereas it's just madness, you know.
I mean, I don't know. I think that you might get a lot of hate about this episode, about this podcast episode.
Well, I welcome
Dominic,
it.
how dare you say
Mrs.
that
Brown's
Boys is
no,
no
because
good.
it was like Mrs. Brown's Boys renewed for another series, and I can see all the comments are like, how? Why? Why is this happening? What are you doing? Who is renewing this stuff?
Really, I think because we've been on the BBC, and
we haven't actually been on the BBC. We're hoping to get on the BBC, but, you know.
We've been on iPlayer, and there's not a lot of comedies out right now on the BBC.
No, there isn't. I think Mrs. Brown's Boys is the only one. No, you have to kind of, for good comedy, you have to dig into the well.
Dig into the well.
And you have to go into like BBC 3 or even, I don't know if BBC 4 do one now. BBC 2 and BBC 3. Because the Starstruck.
Yeah.
With Rose. Yeah, that came out on BBC 3. There was another one that came out on BBC 3 that was really good. Can't remember the name of it. I'll probably remember it later on today and go, oh, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of the good stuff is coming on the not main channel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, drama as well. The Peaky Blinders started on BBC 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Oh, and, you know, it was so funny because I remember I was following the BBC 2 account back when it kind of started. Mm. And they were putting up all these kind of things, Tommy Shelby, you know, and they were putting up production stills. And I was like, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was slowly gaining a followership. And then I could see people going, why is this not on BBC One?
Yeah.
And that was like series 1 or series 2, you know.
Mm.
I think it took like 3 series for it. The 3rd series finally got moved to BBC One.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it seems like BBC One is being a bit timid about what they're putting out now. Like they're trying to sort of stick to the same types of things that they've always have.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of cop dramas, detective dramas on there.
Yeah, there'll be like, Britain's like, that's all you'll see. ITV and, the more murder dramas and...
The more adventurous, like, storylines and...
Well, Banished was on BBC Two. I mean, that got cancelled, but it was still very good, you know?
Yeah, it was a good show.
But yeah.
All right.
I think we're done now we're bashing
we're quiet
these very popular UK shows.
If you found this interesting, be sure and let us know on social media. We are at TButty, TEABUTTY on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all the things.
Well, yeah, with TikTok.
Wherever you
are.
Patreon. Wherever you
and
are,
everywhere else.
We are.
Yes.
Yeah. Let us know if you like any of these shows that Dominic has just sat here and dissed for the last 40 minutes.
Let us know if you disagree or agree with me.
Yeah, let us know. We're curious. Yeah, I mean, we haven't sat and tried to watch a whole season of any of these, obviously. So maybe we're jumping the gun on our opinions.
Except for Mrs. Brown's Boys. No. You're never going to get me to watch that show. That's like ultimate torture to me.
Tweet at T-Buddy and tell Dominic why he needs to watch Mrs. Brown's Boys. Thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in. We really appreciate your support, especially big thanks to our patrons, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.